Well, hello everyone. This is Roy Wood, Chief of Interpretation at Katmai National Park and Preserve, and Mike Fitz, the Media Ranger for the park.
Hi again.
And we're going to do another one of our at least almost weekly chats that we've been trying to do. And this time we're actually trying to deliver what we promised before, which was an attempt at doing a chat from the jacuzzi. And just a few moments ago, we had everybody's favorite Otis fishing on the opposite side of the river, and just pretty much on cue, Otis got up, walked across the river, went up the fish ladder, and disappeared up the river. And then just a few minutes ago, another bear came in, sniffed around a little bit, and left. So we got this brief window here. We may have to leave in the middle of this chat and head back up on the platform. But we did say that we wanted to give you the perspective of having a human being out on some of these places in the river that you've been watching for the whole year. Better for everybody.
And before, I guess I should explain what I'm holding in my hand here. We'll get this out of the way first. Thermometer. Everyone's wondering what the water temperature is and how the bears can withstand being in this cold water. So for the time being, I'm going to put this underneath some gravel here. Get that weighted down. We'll pick it up in just a few moments and see what the water temperature is.
So when one of us is talking, the other one you're probably going to notice is looking around a lot. And we have actually a very good view down here. We can see well underneath the platform. We can see all the way down to what we call the cut bank downstream from us beyond the riffles. And we can see way upriver. So there are only a few blind spots for us, but you will see us looking around. And whenever I'm out on the river, I sort of get the feeling that I'm like a sub-adult. You know, they're always having to look over their shoulders and make sure that there's not some more dominant bear coming, trying to take their spot. And that's what I feel like always when I'm in the river, that I'm always looking around. And so you'll see Mike and I doing that. It's not that this is inherently, dangerous right now, because we have our eyes, we have some rangers on the platform that are watching us, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 visitors up there too. So there are lots of eyes right now in addition to our own. So we're getting a really good look around here, and I don't think you'll see anything sneak up on us.
And if a bear does come, we're just going to walk away from it. So
normally we'd like to talk a little bit more about some aspect of what's going on in the Brooks River area right now, like what are the bears doing, and we'll get to that sort of thing later and answer more questions. But we figure that we need to get in the jacuzzi because we've been promising that for a long time. So Mike will fearlessly lead the way for me, and I'm going to follow. And I've got an iPad here, and this iPad is in a waterproof case, but I don't want to get it wet, so I'm going to be a little more careful in my stepping than he is.
So you're walking in the river, there's dead fish all over the place. This just came down over the falls here. So the bears are looking for anything that can't swim away. Other bears that can't really get a whole fish and they're hungry enough are going to eat this. So this is just part of a fish head. This was a big male salmon right
here. Look at the camera, Mike. Oh, and bleed your air out. Otherwise you'll float like a big fat sub-adult.
One of the things, I don't know, hopefully everyone's...
Don't go any deeper because of your microphone.
One of the things that's I noticed now is actually it's really hard to spot because the water's really, the force of the water is really trying to push me downstream. And you'll see some bears come here trying to push the spot, but they're not quite big enough to really hold themselves in the water very well. But a big bear like Otis or 747 or 856 or 218, Ugly, they can come down here and they can fish the spot really well. Of course, they have many hundreds of pounds on me. I'm not a very big guy, so they can sit here quite easily and wait for fish to come to them. And I can't see anything in the water here. So when the bears are fishing, they're basically doing they're just waiting for the fish to bump into them. And I can't see anything here at all.
I couldn't hear what you were saying, but were you being buffeted, or what was it feeling like?
Sure.
The current, the force of it.
So, being down in the water over here, one of the things that I was really noticing is that the force of the current was trying to push me away. It was pretty difficult for me to hold my ground. And a lot of times sub-adult bears will try to come and fish the spot, or maybe a younger adult bear, and they're not quite big enough to really fish in that location. It does take a really big bear to be able to sit there for long periods of time and fish there well. So bears like 856, 814, 218, 747, Otis, of course, they really love to fish this spot because the salmon do jump into the falls. They hit the falls sometimes, they get disoriented in the current right over here in this plunge pool, and they oftentimes run into the bears, and the bears are just waiting for that to happen. And we should go over to the far pool, give some people a sense of scale over there. We're going to try to head to the far side of the river over here, and I'll show you just how big Otis is compared to a couple of smaller humans like us.
So we may not, you can keep going. We may not be able to make it over to this spot because it does get really slippery right through here. So we'll see how Mike fares as he's trying to go across. And the current's kind of strong there. And I just didn't want to leave you with no conversation, nothing going on while we both tried to walk over there. But I'm having a feeling he's not going to be able to make it there. So while he's trying to do that, we did have a question. Someone asked, has Otis gained enough weight to hibernate? Or how much bigger does he have to get to endure through to the spring? He may have enough fat on him right now that he could successfully hibernate, but in a bear's mind, you can never be really fat enough. So he's going to keep doing what he does best, which is standing over there, waiting for a fish to come by, and keep trying to pack on more fat. You know, it's all about having an insurance policy. If you recall, he was very skinny when he arrived first this spring, and if he doesn't build on, you know, enough fat to get him through the winter and through that slow period in the spring, he could still die. So he needs to make sure that he's got enough to get him through to the middle of a good salmon run in July. So I don't see him stopping anytime soon. You know, besides, we've got a good 6 weeks before winter really sets in here, and so he's going to keep eating as long as he possibly can. And Mike made it. Holy cow. So if you're not looking at me, or if you're still looking at me, don't look at me anymore. Zoom on over to Mike.
Can you hear? Well, I'm gonna try talking right now. I'm not sure if you're gonna be able to hear me, but this is the spot that Otis likes to stand and sit for hours on end, and many other bears will fish over here too. Really what they're looking for is they're looking for fish to swim right in front of them over here. I can see the bottom. As you can tell, the water is not very deep right in this spot. So they're looking for a salmon to swim right in front of them and they can sort of pounce on it. However, I'm not going to go further out because the current in here is actually really strong, and I can't see the bottom very well in there, and it's likely I would take a misstep and maybe stumble and fall, and I certainly don't want to have to, you know, go swimming down the river. One of the things that you can really marvel at the next time you see a bear walking through here is compare how easily they walk through the water here compared to myself. I did have to pick my footing very carefully when I was walking downstream. And this is also a spot where you will see a lot of what has been described as non-human habituated bears fishing in this area, and those are the bears that maybe don't show a lot of tolerance towards the presence of people, for example. So a bear like 755 is nicknamed Scaredy Bear. He's not really habituated to the presence of people. He doesn't really approach the falls platform, and he oftentimes loves to come over here and sit and fish this side of the falls. Although this year he was gaining a lot more body mass. He's grown over the past several years, and he's more likely to move towards the center of the river to try to fish in those spots. However, he still seems to prefer fishing over here. So if you do see a bear that comes down from that trail over there and all of a sudden ends up fishing in this side and maybe not moving to some of the spots that are free and open closer towards where the cam is located at the falls platform, it may be because they don't want to approach the people on the falls platform itself. And I should move a little closer to the falls as well. just show you how tall the falls are. There's about a good 5.5 feet here, I think. And I'm going to head back across the river over here with Roy. We'll see if he has, of course, anything to add. But it'll take me a little while to make my way back down and across. Of course, anytime I'm walking, I have to make sure that a bear doesn't come down this trail over here.
Okay, so looks like Mike is.
Oh, and by the way, there's no cave over here.
Oh,
sometimes shadows play with the light on the rocks, and it does look like there's a hole back in here, but there are some erosional features, but there's no cave on this side of Brooks Falls. The rocks are actually very slippery as well.
Okay, I don't think Mike is talking now. So while Mike is coming across, I'll go ahead and answer a question that's come in. We had a question on whether or not the limping bear that has been seen in the
Some
last
more
few
salmon
days
parts. So this
was
stuff is all through the
469,
river right now.
the bear that a lot of webcam people refer to as patches. And the answer to that is no, that's not the same bear. 469 is a male bear, an adult male bear. The bear that's been seen around camp the last few days is an adult female bear, and the limp is also on the opposite leg. So as of yet, no one has seen 469 that we know of, and you know, he was healing pretty well during the summer, so he's probably you know, coming along. Maybe won't even show up with a limp. And if you are worried that he hasn't shown up yet, you should take some comfort in knowing that over his entire time where he's been seen at Brooks Camp, I don't believe he's ever been seen in July once. He's always been seen in September, usually after camp closes. So I would expect that if we're going to see him on the cameras, we'll see him again sometime, you know, by the end of next week, perhaps. So have you talked about that already?
I haven't, no. It looked like you were answering a question.
I was answering a question, okay. So it's all you know?
Yeah, I just picked this up. I may become infamous for picking up fish parts during this chat because I've done it a few times. But this is a female sockeye salmon. I don't think you're going to be able to see it very well from the cam's perspective.
Years when we come back, there are so many dead salmon on the shores of the streams that they've sort of rotted and the scent is percolated down into the sand, and it's so strong that the bears come and dig up the sand thinking there must be a fish in there. So Mike and I have crossed underneath the platform now, so you won't be able to see us, and we're approaching the emergency exit on the platform, and we will soon be up right where the cameras are, or where our laptop is, and then we'll be back on camera. So we have to turn that down because it'll. No. Okay, we've been told that we're picture-in-picture now, and we may have to turn the volume on the input down here. Let me see what I can do. So, let me see if a question has come in for us now. Actually, we did have a question. Question number 7, Mike. So the bear that always hangs out at the corner by the falls is called Otis. Is it always the same bear over there?
In many cases, yes. That's one of his favorite spots. And when you're sitting over there, you see a sort of a light chocolate brown bear with great floppy ear and a scar above his right eye. It's quite likely him. Other bears will fish in that spot, but at this time of the year, typically not. It's typically him at that side of the falls.
I think yesterday or the day before, didn't Ted come up and they have a bit of not a fight or anything, but a growling match? Or
yeah, actually that's true. Sometimes Ted will fish in that spot, but it seems like Otis is a bit more dominant than Ted. Of course, it's a fluid hierarchy. It's not fixed in stone, so it can vary from day to day, but generally it only varies from season to season. So Otis is a big bear. Ted, he's usually really tolerant of other bears, and you typically don't see him, you know, pushing other bears out of the way. Several bears will just avoid him just because he's a big dude. But Ted will go over there and try to fish it, but if Otis is occupying that spot, it usually seems like Ted is going to walk over there, but fish in a different area.
The next question is, do the bears already have their winter dens established, and is that where they go to sleep right now? No, they don't have their dens chosen. They dig a new den every year. They may go back to roughly the same area when they go to den, but they, you know, I won't say that they never reuse a den, because never's a long time, and I'm sure it has happened at some point in the history of brown bears being in these parts. But as a rule, they do not use the den they've used before. They will dig another one, probably in the same location. And I can see it clearly here, but you may not be able to. But this mountain that you can see right through there, that is part of Mount Dumpling. And that mountain right there is a really common denning area for many of the bears that are around here. And if you've watched Mike's video where he crawls into the bear den, it was somewhere on Mount Dumpling right behind us there. I'm not sure exactly where, probably not visible from here, but that is a common spot, as is Katolanat, which you can see on the at the mouth of the river. The camera that's now being shown underneath the River Watch camera has a great view of Mount Katolanat. There are bear dens over there and on the gorse. But they only use those for the winter hibernation. Every night when it's time to go to sleep, they just go find a place that's out of the way. Sometimes not out of the way. Sometimes they just drop right in the middle of the beach, and that's where they take a nap. Yesterday, Mike and I were in my cabin, and we both stepped out, turned to go down to the beach because we were going to test the microphones to see how they would hold up under the sound. And when we turned to go down to the beach by my cabin, we noticed that we were on the wrong side of a bear closure area, that the bear techs had put signs up because there was a sleeping bear right by my cabin. And we didn't see it, and it was 410 directly opposite where my sort of driveway is. And so she just found a spot that was away from a trail by about 10 yards, dropped, took a nap for I don't know how long enough for us to put signs up there. Yeah, and she lasted a while. So they sleep wherever they can find a spot for it. Sometimes it's kind of comical. They almost just drop like a dog will, just fall over, and then they're out.
Virtually every mountain that you're able to see on the Dumpling Mountain Cam is going to have bear dens on it, except in like the ice covered areas of Mountain Geek. On clear days, you can see Mountain Geek from the Dumpling Cam. So that's one place where they're denning all over.
This is exciting. We have a class of third graders right now on the line watching the camera. Little third graders, I don't know where you're from, but welcome. Glad you can make it. They say they are in all the cams, and our willingness to share the knowledge and Mike's bravery of getting down in the jacuzzi and getting cold. But they want to know, why do bears eat grass, Mike?
Well, sometimes they don't have much of a choice. In the springtime, for example, there's almost nothing to eat but grass. Grass is pretty much it, unless you're skilled at hunting and you get lucky enough to find a moose calf or a caribou calf that was just born. Sometimes bears will hunt those animals, or you find maybe a moose that died over the winter, you can feed on that. So in the springtime, they don't have much of a choice to eat anything but grass because there's almost nothing to eat. At this time of the year, though, they have a lot of salmon. They may eat grass just because the salmon doesn't give them maybe everything they need nutritionally. Maybe they need something else that the grass provides for them. Just for example, like if you ate hamburgers nonstop from McDonald's, it may taste good, but it's probably not that great for you. So you're going to want to vary your diet with a salad once in a while, and it could be why the bears are eating grass at this time of the year. They could like the taste as well too. Some of the plants are kind of sweet flavored.
Yeah, and on the cams it looks like maybe they're always just eating grass, but there are lots of other plants that are just going to show up as greenery, you know, on the camera that they eat that can be very nutritious. And there's the next question for you. So sometimes they are just eating regular old grass. We see them eating grass around the lodge porch. Sometimes you don't see that on the camera, but often they are selectively choosing plants that their mothers taught them when they were cubs to be particularly nutritious. And so it's not the same as eating salmon or eating a nice tasty squirrel or you know, some winter-killed animal that they may come across, but it's sometimes better than just plain old grass. So another question came in while I was talking.
Yeah, so another question here. Can you tell us who the bear is that just came up? Well, right now I can see...
You'll be able to tell us.
Yeah, I can see one bear on the far side of the falls, and that is, of course, a favorite bear on the cams, and that's number 480 Otis. Again, light flop ear, scar above his eye, fishing in that spot that I was standing in, and he's just sort of sitting down there now waiting for a salmon to come to him. The other bear that was moving towards us when we left the river, not exactly sure which bear that was. I didn't get a great look at it. So it could have been an older subadult or a younger adult bear, but I wasn't able to really see very well, so I didn't get an identification on that one. And again, at this time of the year, there's many, many bears that I don't recognize. They grow so much from July until now that it can be very difficult for me to tell who's who.
So the third grade class is from Denver, Colorado at Stedman Elementary. So thanks for tuning in, guys. We really appreciate it, and hope you learned something during this. We're at about the halfway point right now, actually a little bit past it, in case some of you are just joining us. My name is Roy Wood, and I am the Chief of Interpretation at Katmai National Park and Preserve. And to my left is...
Mike Fitz, and I am the Media Ranger here at Katmai.
And the next question that's come in is, in addition to both of us, how many other park rangers are there that are working here? So I don't know if we have time to do the math for it, but I'm going to say that there's between 25 and 28 at any one time working out here. That would include Mike and I. We have some people that come out for just a few days at a time to help out with a particular project, but over the course of the summer, with all the maintenance guys and law enforcement and interpreters and resource management, the people that do the bear management, it's about 25, 28.
And I guess while we're waiting on another question here, I should add too that, again, if anybody is interested in learning about what animals are eating, where they're at, you were again talking about grass and why bears eat grass before. If you want to know what a bear's doing, or any animal really, just take a look at its scat. And I guess scat is more of a biological term in some ways for poop. So if you want to know what an animal is doing from one point in time to another, just take a look at its scat, and that'll tell you a world about the animal itself. And right now we are seeing bear scat not only with salmon parts in it, but also berries as well, and occasionally grass as well too. So even the animals that you find in your backyard, you're in the Denver area, for example, I know there's coyotes around there, there's bobcats around there, and deer and everything else. So take a look at that scat that you find maybe in your backyard or in a town park, wherever it happens to be, and it'll tell you quite an awful lot about what that animal is doing and where it has been.
So we had a question now about if a bear happens to climb into the boats that are visible at the lower river area, what do we do to get them off of the boat? So first of all, the boats that are Park Service boats and boats used by the lodge. The lodge uses their boats mostly for guided fishing trips. The Park Service uses its boats for transporting equipment back and forth from king salmon that won't fit on a plane, for taking large numbers of people, for doing science out on the lake too, doing monitoring of the water quality of the lake. So they're mostly there because they are work-related boats. The really, really large boat that you see all the way out in the distance, that one is how we haul our fuel out to Brooks Camp in the fall to keep the generators going the next year. So we're right now burning mostly the fuel that was brought in last fall, and then we'll have fuel here in the spring when we can't get across the lake because it's frozen, and that's the fuel that will get us through next summer. So that's what the boats are there for. The best thing you can do to keep bears out of your boat or to get them, if they start chewing on something in your boat, is to never let them get to the point where they found something fun there. So we try to keep everything out of the boats that would be attractive to bears, or keep it locked up so they can't get to them. If we left out our life jackets, they would just shred those, and that would be fun for a bear to shred. And we try to not leave anything like our fuel lines in there if we have external gas tanks, because they can smell the gas, and that's very intriguing to them, and they'll come investigate that. If they do find a way to get into the boats and start messing with it, we'll go yell at them. We'll clap our hands. We'll do the things that we do around camp when they're chewing on a building or scratching their backs on something we don't want them scratching on. But it's much easier to prevent them from ever finding out that something is fun to do than to try to stop them from doing it. It's like you know, if you never feed your dog table scraps, it won't come and beg at the table. But once you feed it table scraps once, it's going to always expect that handout. And that's kind of the way the bears are with fun or with food. So we try to keep the fun things away from them and definitely the human food away from them as much as possible.
You know, one really interesting video that you can find on YouTube, I believe, is the bear playing with the basketball that was left outside here at Butch Camp several years ago, and they just had a ball with that. No pun intended. But I guess I did intend a pun. So next question: do the bears? And this is a two-part question. Do the bears den inside of the park? So we'll get to that part first. And yes, they do. We don't know exactly where the bears that are fishing at the river now will den. Roy talked about that earlier in the chat about how they'll go to the surrounding mountains. We know they go to the surrounding mountains here because in the 1970s a biologist was here and he ended up putting radio collars on the bears in the fall, the bears that were here in the fall, and tracking those bears to the surrounding mountains. They found and he found that's where they went to their dens. So they're denning mostly inside of the park. Second part of that question, however, is that are they safe from hunters? And for the most part, yes. However, bears inside of the park here occasionally do wander outside of the park. And there are certainly documented cases in the 1970s, I know of, during those tracking studies of the bears here along the river. They found that some of those bears did wander outside of the park boundaries and were shot in legal hunts. And also in the 1990s as well, too, there was some radio collared bears on the Pacific coast of the park. And some of those bears wandered outside and they were shot legally in a hunt as well. So for the most part, the bears aren't wandering outside of the park boundaries. Katmai is a very big park, but it's not, the bears here aren't completely insulated from the influences of people. And that's another reason why we do want to make sure that we're giving bears space here along the river, because bears along the river that may have had previously benign experiences around people where people don't bother them and people give them the right of way in those situations. If those bears with that experience wander outside of the park, especially like in the king salmon area, where maybe they're subjected to hunting, but also if they start to investigate people's objects or homes, pets, or if they're just hanging around someone's yard, a lot of the people in the local area, and you can imagine, you don't want a big brown bear sitting in your front yard in many cases. So we try to give bears space, not only so they can survive here in the park, but if they do wander outside of the park, that they're less likely to approach people and get fun things from us and get themselves into trouble in the surrounding towns.
So we have a quick question here. We have to do this quickly because we're not supposed to do this. Take off your hat.
Oh yeah, we're outside, and my hair is...
your hair.
Okay.
Come in close. The screen capture on us. Hurry before the boss gets here.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're not...
Gear on because we know we're always supposed to have it on. Okay. Oh, I just turned off the iPad. Let me get it back up again. We had another question other than that one, and that was, so there's a female bear with 3 cubs that hangs out in the lower river a lot, and her cubs are slightly different colors. Why is that? Well, there are a lot of reasons why they could be different, slightly different color. There's always variation in any animal, just natural variation in colors. They are not identical triplets. That's not what happens when a bear has multiple cubs. And in fact, they may all have different fathers even. So there are reasons why, normal genetic variation, they're not identical, and they may have different fathers. Would be the top 3 reasons why I could come up with it. There's also kind of wear and tear factor. Some coats just seem to fade faster than others. I don't know why. But we do see that a lot of variation in them, and completely natural, completely normal. And I'm assuming, well, actually I shouldn't assume which one you're talking about. Probably 402. I think there's the most difference in color there.
Yeah, there's a little bit of difference.
Yeah.
And as the bears age too, the differences in color actually get more pronounced. So it's easier to see with yearling cubs the differences in color versus newborn cubs. Newborn cubs come out of the den almost all of them seem to be a kind of a dark chocolate brown color, but now they start to get different shades of coat colors here and there. It's much easier to see in the fall than it is when they're first born. And I do see Otis. I'm still looking over my shoulder, so we're not looking directly at the falls. And Otis is still sitting over there, and I don't think he's caught anything since we have moved away from the falls. But again, it seems to be a successful strategy for him, sitting and waiting and waiting and waiting, because he's not really expending any energy sitting in the water right over there.
So, Mike, if you can put yourself in the mind of a bear for a moment, and you were just in the jacuzzi, so you got that fresh in your mind, and you just walked across the river over to where Otis is, so that's pretty fresh in your mind. Which is easier? Maintaining your position in the jacuzzi, which you think burns more energy? Maintaining your position in the jacuzzi all day, or walking around the river looking for food? Or just sitting where Otis is?
Certainly walking around the river expends much, much more energy. It was very difficult for me actually to move from the far side of the river, from where Otis is, back to that island. First of all, I didn't have really great shoes on, and the bottom of the river is slimy and quite slippery, but the current was pushing on my legs quite a bit. I wasn't, of course, worried about getting wet with the suit that I have on, but the current was pushing on me. It's uneven. Salmon have dug holes in the stream bed as well to lay their eggs in, so sometimes I would step in those, and that would knock me off balance a little bit. So definitely it was much harder and more energetically taxing to move from one spot to another. So if you're a bear, you want to sit in one spot if you can afford to. If the food is going to come to you, there's really no reason why you're going to do anything
And
else.
if you can afford to defend that spot. That's
another big thing too.
Some little subadult is not going to be able to hold its own in the jacuzzi or over where Otis is if one of these other larger bears wants it. So you will see them often doing the more desperate acts, the endlessly wandering and jumping and splashing, and it's they just don't have their place in the hierarchy assured, so that they can go stand where they want to be and have it without having to defend it or flee all the time.
It'll be pretty fascinating, I think, if we have the cams going for several years for you to get to know some of those younger subadult bears and see how they grow and fit into the hierarchy up here at Brooks Falls. Because right now they're displaced from the best fishing spots. They're fishing downstream. And
Got a bear right here behind us.
oh yeah,
I'm going to see if I can aim the camera over here. You can see it come right behind me, maybe. Yep, there we go. It's right at the end of the gate.
and that is a subadult bear that's walking behind us. But this one's not very big. And
I just unplugged me, but I still have power. Well, that's the best I can do to show you where it is.
so you might see that one on the cam soon. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's probably gonna head out and be out at least on this side of the river. Maybe not all the way over in a little bit. So let's see. Answered the jacuzzi one. Fortunately that bear came along at just the right time to give us a little bit of a stall here till another question came in. Next question is, how do the anglers keep the fish they caught and transport back to their cabins or camps without attracting bears along the way? First of all, if you are going to keep a fish, you can only keep a fish, one fish a day beneath the bridge. Downstream from the bridge, yeah. Downstream from the bridge to the mouth of the river, you can have one fish a day. If you go a quarter of a mile from the mouth of the river, you can have a few more. But to get to the point of the question, how do they keep it away from bears? Immediately upon catching it, you must kill it. And you should kill it in the water, so any blood or slime goes back into the water and washes away. Then you have to immediately put it in the bag that we provide you with. Not some flimsy bread bag that you brought from home, but we have these heavy-duty, puncture-resistant bags that we will give you for free, and you put your fish in that. And you cannot take it to your cabin. You must take it immediately to the fish freezing building, which is not too far from the river. Inside of the fish freezing building, we have a big deep freeze for the fish. You write your name on the bag, you drop it in there, and then you can claim the fish when you leave. We do not allow any food to be in the lodge cabins, and we do not allow any of the fish to be taken down to the campground. We need to make sure that bears never, ever associate human beings with food here. So we have a lot of rules that are all designed to prevent a problem from ever occurring, because currently we don't have a problem here. Bears don't get human food. Only rarely do they steal a fish from anybody, and it's usually someone that hasn't broken their line. with enough time, and the bear comes out of the brush and intercepts them. But that's one of our goals here, is to make sure that we never develop a problem bear, because like I said before, once the bear finds something fun or finds that food source, it's very, very difficult to break them of that habit.
And I should add as well, most of the people you see fishing in the river aren't fishing for salmon, actually. They're fishing for rainbow trout.
Yeah.
This area is world famous for its rainbow trout fishing, Arctic char, Arctic grayling. There's a bunch of different fish species here that grow very, very fat on salmon eggs. And right now the fishing is very easy because the rainbow trout and Arctic char are gorging on salmon eggs. So all you have to do is put a lure on your line that looks like a salmon egg, and you're probably going to catch a trout pretty darn easily. And those are catch and release fishing. So again, everything upstream of the bridge in the Brooks River is catch and release.
If you've noticed on the underwater cam the last few days, there have been a lot of rainbow trout in there, and they actually seem to be posing for more photos than the sockeye salmon. And I know a number of people have snapped some wonderful shots of the rainbow trout looking right into the camera with big grins on their faces. And sometimes the trout will swim by and you'll see that they can hardly close their mouths, and that's because they've just been engorging themselves on the salmon eggs for the last couple of weeks, and you know, their cheeks are all bloated, their mouths will barely close, and in addition to the eggs, they'll eat little bits of the salmon flesh too that tumble downstream. So look for that on the underwater camera. That's only going to be going for probably not even 2 weeks, because we'll have to take the camera out before Mike and I leave this fall, because it's attached to the bridge, which has to come out of the river as part of camp closing. And that camp closing and leaving this fall leads to the next question, which is, are Mike and I going to be back here working at Brooks Camp next year? And I think, you know, right now there's no reason to believe I wouldn't be back. I can't speak for Mike. Mike has to.
Well, if I'm not back, he probably fired me.
That's right, shape up. So I don't think either of us has any plans on going anywhere, but you know, I've been here for 10 years, 11 summers now, so you know, I always keep my eyes and ears open for other opportunities to go see one of the other amazing parks that we have. You know, there's over 400 parks right now, and I've only worked in like 4 of them, so I've got a long way to go before I retire if I think I'm going to get to a large percentage. And Mike's worked at a lot of them, not me.
Yeah, many rangers like myself, you know, we work in national parks because we want to explore them, we want to experience them. And earlier in my career, I was hopping around to a lot of other national parks quite frequently. In fact, I've worked in 8 total, and that's, I hope you know, I was a good employee at those other parks. I found Katmai and I've stayed for quite a few years for sure. But I wanted to explore a lot of different places. So when I say 8 parks, I was moving around quite a lot because I wanted to see one place and I wanted to see another place maybe the next summer. So I ended up moving around quite a bit just because I thought it was fun, and I had a lot of great experiences moving from spot to spot.
I think we know there are so many fantastic places where we could be working, but we never want to leave the place that we're at. Or if we do leave the place we're at, we often find that that's our favorite place and we want to be back there again. So you always have to think twice before you know, jump out of the frying pan and into the fire. You want to at least hit the next frying pan. Enough about us. The next question is, do we know of any altercations between bears and fishermen? Some camps have shown fishermen and bears with cubs in close proximity. Now I'm going to assume that you mean, with altercations, you mean that has there been any kind of physical contact or charges or something like that, maybe not just that they looked at one another. We have not had any intentional physical contact in, gosh, how long?
It's almost 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's the ranger on the falls that you're thinking of, right? Because I'm not counting like the kid that got knocked over.
Okay.
Because the bear over its shoulder being chased by another bear. It wasn't an aggressive thing. So we have to occupy the same areas that the bears need to occupy and recreate here in the same areas where the bears need to feed. We have an incredible record of doing that safely for the last 60 plus years, and so that's, you know, that's something that we're all very proud of. Now that doesn't mean that sometimes there aren't charges. Usually they're hop charges, which are just short like a couple of steps, almost a bounce that the bear does, slapping its paws on the ground at the last moment to try to startle you. And it's happened to me before. It is startling when a bear does that. And so we have that.
This one is about Otis, and it asks, do bears get depressed? Otis seems sad. And I've kind of noticed that with him. He does look like he's sort of forlorn in many ways. But I don't know, I'm looking at him now, I don't think we could sort of really ascribe that emotion to him. Bears are intelligent animals, and we know that our domestic dogs and cats sometimes feel, it looks like at least they feel happiness or sadness or fright, whatever it happens to be. And bears are just as smart as those animals. So it's quite likely that they have a wide range of emotions. I don't know about him sitting in the water like that, if we could really say that he's a depressed animal or sad at this point.
I think he looks depressed almost purely because we're looking down on him, and he's looking down, and then his ears flopped over too. I think that just makes him look like he's moping. But remember, you were down at the water level. He's focused intently on those fish going by there. So he's probably more alert than Mike is right now.
Probably. Yeah.
Because Mike's life doesn't depend on this, but Otis's life does depend on getting that food. So I know we're at about the 2-hour mark, and we started a little bit late today. I think we have at least another couple questions.
Yeah, one more question on here. Any white or blonde bears in the park? Some people call them ghost bears. Well, we do have very blonde bears here in the park. We don't see them very often, but some of them can be bleached to be nearly blonde in color. So, but we don't really have what would be called a ghost bear that I guess you would find in British Columbia.
Right, like the ones on Admiralty Island. I think that's where they are, isn't it?
I can't remember.
Or an island near Admiralty, the spirit bears. But yeah, we don't have any sub race of them that are uniquely that color. It's always a possibility that a sow could give birth to one that is an albino at some point, but that's different than I believe what you're talking about, which is a sort of a sub race of particular color.
So keep looking. I mean, there's more people watching the cams than there are rangers, and you often do see sort of unique things that maybe we don't happen to catch. So if you see something like that, get a screen capture of it, because we would certainly love to see that. So it is, I guess, about 3 o'clock our time, 4 o'clock Pacific, and maybe about time for us to wrap things up, I guess. We'll try to do one of these maybe next week or soon.
We only have another week out here because we'll be closing camp down by next Friday. Everybody will be packed up and on their way out of here, with the exception of a couple of bear management people and some law enforcement folks and a few skeleton maintenance workers to close things up for the winter. So we definitely want to get another chat in while we can actually be out here at Brooks Camp and give you that on-the-ground perspective. We intend to continue to do them periodically throughout the winter from King Salmon, but it won't be as much fun for us because we won't have been out here watching the things, and we certainly won't be able to slosh around in the river the next time to play around. Oh, we do have one more question that squeaked in. See, we'll talk forever, but I know that the people in California, it's almost time for them to go home, so we don't want to keep them longer. So the next question is, can you give us a brief history of the viewing platforms at the falls? When was it expanded to include the riffles? So the first of the viewing areas was put in almost as soon as the lodge was built here back in about 1950. And there wasn't an elevated platform like you see now. There was just a spot along the side of the river, basically formed by the dynamiting of the fish ladder, which was put in just before the lodge was built. So there was a pile of some gravel here that was excavated from the fish ladder. And people used to come up, fish the falls. They didn't see very many bears back then. In fact, it was extremely rare to see a bear. But they would come up and fish the falls, even catch fish and cook them right here, either on the downriver island where we were standing at the start of the chat, or right here where the platform is today. And over the years, the bear viewing started to improve, and the Park Service built first just a wooden platform right at ground level, no boardwalk leading to it, and you would walk through the woods for quite a ways tiptoeing around sleeping bears, and bears running from the falls with a fish in their mouth trying to not have another bear steal it from them. Quite harrowing. And then in, boy, I don't know when the first elevated one was built. Do you know?
It was in the mid 1980s, I believe.
Yeah, okay.
But I can't recall the exact year. But it was. I mean, we're sort of using that original falls platform now. It's very small, limited capacity of 40 people. But I think it was built in the 1980s.
And then we
mid-80s.
enlarged it again and added the big length of boardwalk in about 2000. And that's where we're standing right back at where the new boardwalk begins, and that's when the Riffles platform was added. And it was also about that time that the platform was added at the lower river, down by the floating bridge. So I apologize for not knowing all of those dates. We don't usually get asked construction type questions, and so that's why we're speaking in generalities of sometime in the 80s, about 2000. If you're really interested in that sort of thing, we can try to get together a timeline for you. You might also find it in the administrative history of Katmai National Park. Some of it's in there, but it'd be probably easier for us just to get you a quick timeline and post it.
And the administrative history of the park is called Isolated Paradise, and that's available online. I think you could probably find it fairly easily by searching Park Histories, Katmai, Isolated Paradise, those keywords, and you might be able to look that up fairly easily.
Okay, well, that was question number 21. I think we did pretty well today, getting them all crammed in with the technical difficulties of distorted sound in the river and then the loss of sound up here. I want to thank all of you for tuning in, especially the third grade class from Denver, Colorado, from Stedman Elementary. I appreciate everybody's time coming here, and we will hopefully do some more of these before we go. And until then, look for us answering questions online. And I don't know, Mike, you want to say bye?
Well, yeah. I guess we can thank Otis, too, for giving us that 15
Definitely.
minutes where we could go down into the river.
That was pure luck. So, thanks, everyone.
Okay.
We'll see you next time.
Yeah, have a good day.
Bye.